Morning, everyone. Morning, thanks for coming. This is the President's Address. I'm Dan Bausch, the current President. And some of you who were here last year would have heard my President's Address last year on the nexus of tropical medicine and human rights. If you didn't hear it, I would encourage you to go. You can pull that up on YouTube. But I thought, having had my say last year, that people probably would lose their patience with another Dan Bausch soliloquy this year, and so I thought we would do something a little bit different with the President's Address. And so I've asked some of my colleagues from the past presidents to join me. There are quite a few other past presidents, and all of them, I thank all of them who are interested and willing. Many were willing to come up on stage, but in 45 minutes, a group of 25 people was going to be a little bit difficult, so we have just a few here to join us. And the format, well, you know, this is kind of, I hope, the wisdom of the ages across the line. But the format is for the inquiries of the youth. And so we started out, put out an inquiry to our trainees and young investigators and students, say, what are the questions that you would like to ask of presidents and past presidents? And so we'll start at least with that. First, let me introduce the panel here that we have. As you know, I've been your president privileged to be for the last 2 years. And to my right, we have Regina Rabinovich, who was in 2018. Chandy John was, 2019. David Walker was back in 2013. Julie Jacobson was right before me, my predecessor, and then Jim Kazura in 2012. So we have a good, I think, stretch across at least a decade of a very evolving society. And I'd like to separate this into 3 broad categories. And so we'll start with the questions that students and trainees had sent in to me, and a few of those. And it's just really a discussion format. It's not that every person's going to answer every question. And then I want to go bigger as we go. So starting with trainee questions, then we'll talk a little bit, if we have time, about the society and the society's role, and then a more global, and get people's idea of kind of the world today and the society's place in it, and the challenges and opportunities that face us. I have here questions that'll fill the whole time. I hope we don't have to use them, because I would like to have people, and this is your opportunity to ask questions of the President. So I'll kick us off for a few minutes, but when you're ready, I'll maybe give the signal, but please do come up to the mic, and please do enter into the conversation, and we'll go from there. So thanks very much, and we'll start that off. So first, from some of the questions distilled down from various trainees and young investigators, one question: what skill sets should the society offer the trainees beyond what they receive in their academic homes? And so people who are, of course, doing their doctoral degrees in different disciplines, and we know what they get generally in academia, but what should the society be offering them that they don't get in their academic homes? Anyone want to take that on? If not, I'm happy to call on, I think, Julia.
Yeah, I think we heard pretty loud and clear cry for voices to be heard more broadly. So I think it's really on communication skills, writing op-eds and taking an active voice in the importance of science. And I think that skill set, I mean, Karen in her CEO role has always had a communications and advocacy session here, but I think there's more skills in that area, and I think the society could take an active piece in that, because it's going to be an important area moving forward, and that's just one thing I'm sure of many that could be provided by the society.
I think I could add something to that. I think that when I was the president, it was a different era in the sense of there was even discussions before this, and some of the earlier presidents before me can describe this, that should we change the name of the society, especially when global health became a new moniker, okay, for this area of research. But we said, well, the journal had its name, so that never happened. I think if Steve Hoffman's here, he can comment on that. That was one of the hot button issues, I think, when he was president. But I must say, what is really good about the society now is that it's much more multidisciplinary. And it's certainly, as Julie just referred to, is much more diverse. It's more diverse racially in the United States terms. This meeting is fantastic. The amount of scientists and physician scientists, basic scientists, and students who are from Africa or in other endemic countries where we had the historical perspective, it was colonial. And that was one of the issues with their name. Is it a colonial type thing? The answer is yes, we all know that now, but I think we have made phenomenal progress in this. And it really gives you the opportunity to see people who are working in the laboratory on a very, very, deep method or something like that. On the other hand, this can be integrated with field studies of infectious diseases as well as animal models of diseases. So I think that if I was a young person, which I was now, but this would be a great society to be in. And I must say that many of my friends that I've known for over 30 or 40 years have been members of this society. It's this kind of a sustaining group of people.
Thanks, Jim. Chandy?
Just building on that, I think the greatest strength of the society is the ability to collaborate across disciplines. So this isn't a society for any one particular thing only. There are smaller groups for that, but it's a group that brings together all the different things in tropical medicine, global health, including basic science and translational work and clinical work, but also public health and bigger issues like climate change. And so I think maybe this is one of the things that has been really helpful for me is that I've built so many collaborations through the people I've met here, but maybe one thing the society can do even more is teach you how to do that. We sort of do it on our own because you meet people or you go to talks and it's like, oh, this is cool, let's talk about this. But how can we build upon that to kind of leverage the greatest asset of this society, which is its diversity of disciplines and working together?
I think everyone is quite aware of the challenge that science and scientists have in being part of the voice of what science is real and what is fake news. And that takes courage because you are dealing with some very strong activist communities who feel that their version of good science or data is the right one. And for those like Peter Hotez and others that have engaged, whether it's anti-vaccine or ivermectin with COVID or any of the contentious issues that exist today, it's scary because you take a risk. You are a target. You will get attacked on social media. So I think aside from your academic track, deciding what area, not only your expertise, and press can call you and say, what do you know about dengue in Bolivia and what's happening with dengue? Those are facts. But how to deal with fake news and take your communication skills and where you are willing to take risks in speaking to the press and to outside and how to manage that, that's not taught in academia. That's something that we do have models within the society for how to do that and how to manage those risks. But we need to be brave.
Yeah, thanks. I'll come to you, David, and just one comment. And if you weren't, in relation to this, if you weren't at the Science Under Assault session the other day with Peter Hotez, and also the cheat sheet on how to talk to Washington yesterday, those were really addressed this, and I think some in very interesting ways. And remember, as everyone who's you've paid to be here, and I don't know exactly when it'll come out, but you have access to recordings. And so if you weren't there, those were two that I would definitely recommend that you look up because they really address some of these issues. But over to you, David.
So I think one of the things that we offer and should be doing more of is mentorship. I think we need to, at this meeting, identify people that we can interact with on an ongoing basis, not just at a meeting, but throughout the year, and develop a relationship to help to identify and create the leaders. And this is people from every country, not just the people that are working in laboratories in the United States, and develop them into the ability to be leaders, to understand, to push the frontier of knowledge forward, and that they can do that, and to help them find the way to accomplish that.
Thanks, David. We did, as a follow-on to that, we did many years ago now, I don't remember how many years ago, 10, 20, no, it wasn't 20 years ago, 10 years ago, we tried a mentoring program. And there were many mentees, there were far fewer mentors, so it was hard to put together. But I do actually agree that it's time for the society to try to revisit that in some way, because I think you look around the room, there's incredible potential of younger people and older people, and somehow trying to put them together to capitalize on that transition in careers, I think is really an important thing for us to do. Another question from, I don't know the person, most of these were anonymous submissions, and we touched upon it a little bit, but I do want to come back to it. How to reconcile competing demands of the research, of what you're doing in your lab and your training, and the advocacy for implementation. And we're all about that these days, I think. We're recognizing that just producing the evidence is not sufficient, but how, especially for a younger person, how do you move towards that translational part of it and into implementation to make sure your work in the lab has impact? Please.
Embedded in that is a critical decision. If you've had something coming out of your lab which needs to become a product, needs to become an intervention, are you willing, is what you aspire to be that driving force and leave the lab, leave what you were doing, and begin really working to drive? We have excellent examples of people that grew up in ivory towers and are out in huge field trials and whose products we're seeing today. Or do you want to advocate to it? You want to talk about what the needs are, what the next steps are, figuring out who needs to listen to what you have come up with and help do that translation. It's not fit for purpose for everyone, but the first thing is, do you want to advocate, do you want to create linkages, or do you want to figure out how to do it yourself, and then what the pathway for that is? They're both choices, it's fine. But that's the critical first decision, I think, that needs to be made.
Joy?
Yeah, I think this is a really important point. And I think it's one of the things is that this society can really be a part of that, because you do have such cross-disciplinary areas. Sitting in the audience are program managers from programs in endemic countries. They understand the needs and the challenges that they're facing, and those voices need to be heard. And once you see that, I think really focusing and looking at the questions that you're asking and seeing how are those aligned with the needs of the field, and ensuring that you have those conversations. And I think we should facilitate a lot more of those conversations here. There's a meeting, the CORE NTD, the Coalition for Operational Research on NTD meeting that happens around this, where they focus a lot on that. And I think we can bring that kind of thinking into ASTMH as well, and try and get some of those networking opportunities, because there's so many brilliant minds out there. This is just such an incredible collection of people. And if all of the things that you're working on were aligned towards the key challenges that people are having in countries, just imagine the power of that. So I think that there's a piece of being intentional, and even having it in your mind. Asking the question is already a whole leapfrog away from just doing something that's interesting versus doing something that really will have value and move things forward. But this is a group, and seeking it out and having the conversations here is one place. But as you were pointing out, David, we really need to have those conversations throughout the year. And I know that's happened for me in the hallways. Some of the things that I'm most proud that I've worked on have happened in the hallways of ASTMH and then been built from there.
Thanks, Julie. I'm smiling inside about Julie. She's so passionate about what she does, because I talk with Julie every week as part of our president leadership. And there's no conversation I've had over the last 2 years where she hasn't mentioned core NTDs. It's just like she's so into it that it always comes up. So I'm not surprised that it came up here, but that's great. Chandy, I think you wanted to come in.
Yeah, so this is a great question, and I think to Gina's point, there's a finite amount of time and effort that everybody has, so you do have to kind of focus your work. I had two wonderful mentors, have still two wonderful mentors, one of whom is right on stage, Jim Kazura, and the other one, Chris King, is out in the audience. And they were role models of doing basic science translational work and clinical trials. So you can do them if they're related to each other. And so that's one of the things I've done. But I think that if you're doing all of those things, which is a lot, and it's a lot to try to do well, you may not be able to do the implementation piece. You may need to partner with people to do that. The example I think of is during COVID-19. So this was, not malaria, which is what I work on, but I was seeing patients with COVID-19. It was very important in children. It was being neglected, and so one had to advocate for it. But it did get to a point where I thought there are other people that can do this, that have good voices, and if they're willing to let me rely on them to do it more, because I have this other work I'm doing that's more specialized to what I can do. So I think there is we all want to do everything, and you can't, and so you have to decide what your focus is.
Yeah, I was thinking a similar thing. We often all want to do everything. There's some people who don't want to do different parts of that, and I think that's fine. I think that part of it is figuring out what the right team is. There's some people who are really going to be focused on generating the evidence in the laboratory of the field, and other people who are more on the advocacy side. I think when I'm thinking about younger people and trying to figure out what they want to do, an important part is just recognizing where can you go. Like if you want to do the advocacy part, don't choose a postdoc somewhere with someone who's just really into only the evidence generation, or vice versa, right? If you're into the advocacy part and the person, or you're into the basic science part, and your mentor is really more on the advocacy, there might be a misfit there. So thinking a little bit of what your profile is, what you want your profile to be, and making sure that you're making the right choices to be somewhere where that's encouraged, and where you can get the skill sets to engage in that way. David, did you want to comment?
Yes, I think it's a long ways from an idea to implementation, and I'm too old probably to do it.
Microphone, closer.
Yeah.
But the important thing, and you can do it as a young person, is to identify what you have enthusiasm for. And you may not know how you're ever going to get there. All you have to figure out is the next step. And you have to have in mind what you want to get out of that next step. So right now, at age 80, my enthusiasm is a vaccine for scrub typhus. We don't know which antigen stimulates protection. So we've got a long ways to go in the laboratory in preclinical studies before we'll ever get to implementation. But you have to have that goal in mind at the beginning, and you have to be willing to pursue it. And you might get to a point where there's no company that wants to do it, and you have to start a company. And if things work, maybe you can sell your company and go ahead and retire.
There you go. The key message. There you go. Go ahead and retire. And I also, just as I knew that Julie was going to work in core NTDs, I knew that David was going to work in scrub typhus. But moving on to a next question, I guess a broader one. I talk with students who are doing their doctoral degrees and going through their training, and there's a lot of people who are really struggling with that now and feeling, it's really hard to get money for this, and the grants are tough to come by, and you put in a lot of efforts, and so there are people saying this whole science career thing, is that really going to work out? And I'm sure all of you in your respective roles have that. You're seeing that, and what's your answer to them? How do you keep people enthusiastic and engaged when times seem to be tough?
I don't have an answer for that, but I think those of us who are in academics and know that training grants are getting more difficult to get now. And for example, I'm not an infectious disease physician myself, but even applicants to infectious disease training programs now are less likely to go into an academic position. Part of it's the salary's lower. There's all these things that are kind of coalescing around us. But I think that, I think Karen in many ways made me, the advocacy issue is one thing we can do. Like we had a meeting earlier this morning, the ex-president had a meeting, and we talked a little bit about how do we try to promote better NIH funding or other federal funding, for example. And this is really something that we all face in academia, at least right now. And it's important that we do this as a group, whether you're students or there are people that are at the other end of the spectrum, at the latter stages of their careers to do this type of thing. And it's not like, it's not easy to do this, but I think that like at ASTMH, I remember that we did try this thing. We tried to match a mentor with mentees, and I think we just didn't have enough. I think we probably could improve that type of thing, is anticipating that ahead of time and actually making that a goal of the society to do that. Because many of the people that I worked with, that were my mentors, I met at this meeting, and it just so happened we had been at the same institution, but this way you can actually start matching people. I think it's an experiment that's worth trying. It may or may not work again. I think we tried that for 2 or 3 years, Karen, didn't it? Was something like that, but we could have probably, we should find a way to do that more effectively than we did that before.
With online interactions with one another, like Zoom and Teams,
no.
you know, we can do
they
things now
actually
we
matched.
couldn't
I think
do
we tried to
then.
match a mentor with the potential student in that area, and you'd even go to different talks with them and things like that.
Yeah.
You know, you could actually establish a relationship with
But
that
you
person.
can see, we can actually do it online now, and we
Well,
couldn't do
that's
it.
true,
We could
that's
not
true.
do it before. That's my point.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is when, you know, time flies, Jim. It wasn't 2 or 3 years ago. It was like 10 years ago.
Was it 10 years ago?
And it wasn't a time when we had easy access to online communications.
That's
And
all
that was
true.
one of the challenges, I think, to it, was that it was often kind of a one-off thing. You met the person here at the meeting, and then it was pretty difficult. I remember, like, I was a mentor to a mentee in Australia, and we met one time. After that, there was no easy way to keep in contact, but now there is the possibility, perhaps, you know, to have that one meeting that happens when we have our annual meeting, but, you know, that can be kept up, of course, and we have opportunities through Zoom and all to keep that up that we didn't have before. But I do agree. I think this is one of the things, the mentorship is a role that we need to revisit from the society. Julie.
Yeah. I think part of the underlying piece on that is the question on career path and how to, you know, my career path didn't exist, right? Like what I did wasn't real. There was no path, right? It was forging out with the machete to find the way to, you know, I recycled cans and sold bagels to get an international awareness group at my medical school to try and at least have a couple people caring about something that happened outside the walls of the school when I started. You know, so I think a big part of this is that if we're doing really interesting things, we're forging ways between columns and silos, and you sometimes have to make that happen. And there was a really good session on, you know, like planetary medicine and these pieces that was going on. And even in the room, there was problem solving around, but where do we find the resources? And then there was like, oh, there's this little World Bank thing that it looks like it's not related, but there's this little sub part of it if you look at it. You know, so I think that, you know, yeah, it's a little scary because the path is not clear, but the cool stuff is where the path's not clear, you know. So I think you have to try and find those ways, create them through links, and then, you know, take things and try and expand the definitions a little bit more to say, no, I think this really does fit. You know, I would say don't be daunted by the fact that there's, you know, the steps aren't all logical, but as David was saying, just have an idea of that next step and continue to take it, because that's where the fun stuff happens.
That's really interesting, Julie. I thought I was the only person that ever invented it myself, but I encourage you all to do that.
I think Gina and then Ted.
You know, I wonder if we need to do a little work to untangle the word mentorship. And reflecting on those people that have advised me, criticized me, yelled at me over my career, I actually found the yelling very helpful. I have to reflect that one of the people that you would call a mentor, because I was at a deciding point among career paths, is an anthropologist I met very late at night in Cusco, and met randomly 2 other times in my life when I had a question. And I asked him the question, and he came back with some thoughts that were very helpful to me in making a decision or being comfortable with the decision I was making. We all understand what mentorship means in a training program and who is advising you and what you need to do, whether it's PhD or MD, and the options that you face. But there are opportunities for what I would call mentorship at a lighter, strategic level to people who you align with how they think and challenge you. And I would suggest that you seek that variety of voices in your career that I think can be helpful.
So addressing the question of what do you say in tough funding times, et cetera? What do you say? And specifically for scientists or physician scientists who are trying to get funding in a tough time, I think most of us would agree that the path to success is less about brilliance and about perseverance and a very high ability to tolerate rejection, because you get a lot of rejection and you just have, and it happens at all of our levels. It's happening to all of us now, so don't think it goes away. So that sounds discouraging. And another thing that sounds a little bit discouraging is that there is not a small element of luck. So that's a little discouraging because, like, will you be lucky? Will you be unlucky? But I think the point I would take away from all of this is everyone who's sitting up here, their eyes just light up when they talk about what they do. And we'd all say we have the best job in the world. And so if you feel like that for what you're doing, kind of to the point that it made you forge your own path, you get mentorship, but you do whatever it takes to keep going. And one can't guarantee success, but I think that even if you don't succeed, like, the effort was worth it because you were doing stuff you loved and you thought was meaningful and important. And honestly, like, talk to your colleagues and friends. Most people aren't in work that they enjoy, and we are. So it's worth striving for.
I think I think that point of it's true for all of us, I'm sure, and everybody out there. You know, if you're in your training or relatively younger and you get rejected, do not feel alone, right? Everybody here has gone through a lot of rejection, and in some ways, you know, that the iteration that comes from that, from writing a grant and then getting it rejected and trying to fix it, you know, there's a lot of thought process that goes on there that is helpful overall. The other point, and then we're going to move on from issues that are specific to trainees, but and I think I said this the other night in the plenary session, but tropical medicine people are generally pretty friendly people. And so when you're at a meeting like this, do not be shy, right? And I really encourage students to look around, and you go to a talk and think about, you know, many people are thinking, okay, what is my career path? And I encourage people to think of, like, different profiles. And so you go to listen to Gene or Chandy or whoever and say, yeah, that's pretty cool what that person's doing. And, you know, maybe that's the kind of a profile that I could see, and go up to them, talk to them, send them an email, whatever. You know, most people will be pretty receptive to, and so don't sit back. You know, be aggressive with that, I think, is the way to move it forward. I want to move on now to issues very generally about kind of the society itself and what our role is. And, you know, most people here come to a meeting and say that's what the society is, and of course that's a major part of what we do, but there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. I don't mean the operational part, tons that go on behind the scenes, but there's a lot of strategic thinking to, you know, what should the society be? We know that we're a great meeting every year, but what more can we do that reaches out to more people in the world, offers more opportunity for people in the world to contribute? And then, of course, not to the buzzkill part of it, but it all has to be financially viable. And so, you know, some people will suggest that we should just send everything out to everybody for free, and that would be great if we could, but if we did that, we wouldn't be able to continue. But nevertheless, so there's a lot of thought about how we move into or evolve in this era where there are hybrid meetings, there are in-person meetings. What's really the right look for this? And so I just wonder, any thoughts on how that should look? What should the society look like 10 years from now? In addition, I don't think there's ever any question that we would want to abandon having a great in-person meeting. I think we all recognize that the relationships that we forge and the information that we have, that's extremely important. But in addition to that, how should the society look years from now? Yeah, Gina?
So thinking about that really means you're making projections as to what the world will look like 10, 20 years from now. And we know that whether it's online or in person, it's an increasingly competitive environment for your interest. So part of what one does is, part of one's career is identify where your home is. For a while, for me, it was the Academy of Pediatrics, as I was deeply imbued in vaccines and as a pediatrician. And then I got a one-day pass to something called maybe it was called ASTMH, whatever it was. It was 500 people. And I walked out and said, I've got to come back. So it evolved. It was part of my evolving changes in my interests. but it's identifying your home for where you interact with others. And we need to be very thoughtful about that competitive environment. CUGH now gathers 4,000 people, the European Infectious Disease Society, Tokyo, Korea. I mean, I'm getting invitations for all of these things, but they're not like ASTMH. They're meant to be more like instructional, and some of them, you know, they're not necessarily the scientists presenting. They're very cutting edge work. So I think you need to think about what fits best in your career. And for ASTMH, we need to be forward thinking in terms of who we want to be in that 2020 in the context of the environment and the changing tools for communication.
I have a vision that I think is maybe not very likely, but it's a dream. And it would be that 20 years from now, people would come to a room and not sit facing the audience, but sit facing each other. And they would be gathered together around an issue that they really wanted to solve. And they would be from all over the world, or from the part of the world especially where the disease was most important. And they would be led by people from that part of the world. And it would be a time when you try to brainstorm to find the solutions, and then appoint different people in the group to take the leadership on some parts of that. So that's pretty wild, and probably isn't very likely, but 20 years from now, who knows?
Julie?
Yeah, and I think building on that, thumbs up. I think we have tools to build towards that reality, you know, and I think that, I mean, you brought up the virtual piece, and we're doing some really interesting work on virtual and reaching down to people that are at the sub-district level, which we thought we would never be able to reach with online things, and they're being part of the problem solving and putting ideas in. So I think there's ways to do this, bringing in virtual, and I think there's a way, you know, thinking about ASTMH. There's been constant discussions around thinking about ASTMH in a regional way, and are there ways in which we can have things that happen in regional ways, and we're experimenting with something on that maybe this year in Africa, so stay tuned. I think that there's a way to get things and to then have a way in which those things build up to what happens at the annual meeting, you know, where we're all coming together, and then you have this, I mean, because there really is nothing like being at ASTMH with 5,000 people from I think we were at 130 countries this year, 130 countries. That's amazing. Just think of all the people that are out there that are interesting sitting next to you. So I think that, you know, like but you could have this a structure and a way in which to create that communication and that fostering of new ideas and voices being heard that could be a reality, especially with the tools that we have in 20 years. Who knows where we'll be?
Yeah, and I don't think we're 20 years away from that, actually.
No.
I think we're
Yeah.
much closer than that. And even in recent executive committee meetings and with the board, we've discussed, you know, is the next step for us, again, I don't think anyone would want to say we don't want to have this wonderful annual meeting, but are there things that we can do quite soon that will, for example, have an online meeting that will allow us to reach people around the world, and we recognize that many people can't come to the annual meeting for issues of cost or visas or whatever it may be, but there are tools now, and so I think, you know, it might be a few years until we have a lot of in-person meetings around the world. That's much more challenging and costly and has a lot of issues one has to work out, but I think with some of the online tools, and it's not the same, so it's not one or the other, but some of the online tools to supplement what we do now, I don't think we're far away from that, and have, you know, some discussions about trying to put some things together like that in you know, very near term. And I also think there's a role for the society. You know, when I get this question, people say, what would you like to see for the society? And you know, one of the things I say is I would like it that when someone in the general public or someone in the political sphere says, you know, this is going on in global health or tropical medicine, and they want to know, that they would say, well, what does ASTMH say about this? And so that would be kind of an automatic thing. I don't think we're far from that, but nevertheless, I think, you know, there's a role for us as a convener of experts, and perhaps and obviously we do that in this annual meeting, but we can do it in some specific topics and convening people and meetings around Washington or meetings around Geneva or wherever it may be that's relevant. And so I think, you know, those sorts of things are certainly in discussion right now, and I don't think we're that far from moving, you know, baby steps in that direction.
One thing that I think we will see even within 10 years, and I'm very excited about it, is more diversity in leadership. So we have an incredibly diverse society, and one of the great things about coming to this meeting, as opposed to pretty much any other American society that I know, is that it's a very international meeting. We're a global society. And I am so excited about Lenny Golightly's presidency, and I'm excited that she is the first African-American president of the society. And I feel like, yes. So, I think that's fantastic, and I think that this meeting is one thing that we all realize from this meeting is that the diversity of the participants is what makes it great. Like getting input from everyone is what makes it great, and so I look forward to seeing people from Africa, Asia, South America being president on the board and helping us lead the society in new directions, because it will make the society better. Thanks.
I was going to say a similar thing, and that so if you're out there and you're, well, first of all, maintain your membership, but don't be happy just to maintain your membership. Get involved. There's a lot of other things you can apply to be on the scientific program committees and reviewing the material that comes in and shaping the program. There's the Young Investigator Awards. There's a lot of other things. So don't be satisfied to just say, okay, I'm a member and that's it. We really want your contribution and building towards leadership roles, and especially, not uniquely, but especially people coming from areas where many of the diseases that we study are endemic. And so LMICs encourage you in particular to think about leadership roles in the society. You do have to put in your time, right? If it's your first year as member, you might not yet put your hat in for president, so take a little time. But yeah.
I wanted to make just a plea to the younger, if I may use that phrase, people that are members of the society, that the answer to what we will be in 10, 20 years is in your hands. What do you need it to be? How is what you need from a society changing over time will actually reflect what it is your changing needs are. And that's the nature of being a membership group, where your voices are the ones that count in terms of where we're heading.
So if you have questions, this would be a good time. The time's running too fast, really, but if you have questions, please step up to the mic. Yeah, great. And to introduce yourself, please. And then
Thank you very much. My name is Anne McCarthy. I'm from Ottawa. I was reflecting earlier, I think I've been part of this society for almost 30 years, and one of the big benefits of this society is how people stay involved for a long time. And as you said, I understand when you were planning this, you asked all the presidents who would like to get up and present, and they all stood up and were happy to do it. So I would ask if we can there's a lot of presidents, ex-presidents in the room. Is it okay if we get them to stand up so the students can see who they can sort of gravitate through? These people continue to be pillars of the society, and I think it's important to recognize.
That's a grand idea. Why don't we have them all stand up and give them a round of applause? Great. Thank you. We'll go here and then over to yeah, please.
Blaise Dongy from Washington State. We call the society tropical medicine, so that's our team. And the society might be thinking about is, when are we going to take this to the tropics? When are we going to take the annual meeting to the tropics? It might be an investment, but it's a good investment, because when you turn around the room, you see many people from the tropics. And so if we take to the tropics, but we bet maybe in 10 years, in 5 years, even rotating between North America and the tropics every 5 years or something, that would be a very good investment.
Thanks.
We have addressed that in the past, and we've had local meetings, like in Peru. I think we've had some in Kenya in the past 20 years, perhaps. But I think part of it's a financial issue, too. Yeah.
So that's exactly right, and I'll speak very bluntly. Someone said to me the other day, okay, why don't we have the meeting in, I think it was in Kenya, Nairobi, and I said, we can have the meeting in Kenya, but you have to guarantee me that we'll have the same number of people who will register and come to the meeting and pay the same amount, because we need to be financially viable, right? And I know that's not how we like to think about it, and that's not your primary responsibility, but it is the leadership's responsibility to make sure that we can do all this, right? And so I think we do want to extend into the tropics or LMICs. There's no question about that. We need to do it in a way that allows us to be financially viable and sustainable. I think the first outreach is probably going to be more smaller meetings and online things that are less risky in terms of finances, but it's an important point, and it is also the topic of much discussion about how to do that next. As a little bit of a backup point, we canceled a couple meetings, of course, during COVID. That's a tough time for everyone to not have those. We felt like we needed over the last few years to stabilize the ship, to have an in-person meeting in Seattle, which we did, a great meeting last year, another great meeting in Chicago. Now people feeling, okay, we're back in the groove and things are a little bit more stable, and it's time now to think about how we move forward. And I think meetings overseas or some presence overseas is definitely on the list for discussion.
Well, I remember the ones that was canceled in Puerto Rico. Hurricane hit, and it wiped out the place where we were going to have the meeting.
Yeah. You do know that's still USA, right? But anyway,
It was like 19.
we'll go here.
Hi, my name is Debbie. I'm from FIND, and I was thinking a lot about the discussions earlier this morning about the need for students and trainees to look at mentors and to think about mentorship. Work with colleagues who are above us, who are interesting and exciting positions. But I'd also like to argue and kind of push for a lot of our older colleagues who've been in this field for a long time, not only to think about being mentors, but also being sponsors. I think what's challenging for many younger people is knowing where to go, but also sometimes needing the help to get to where they want to go. And it takes a lot of good relationship building between the students or the trainees and the mentors to become a sponsor, but I think it's quite important to also think of that next step for our leaders as well, as to champion people to move up.
Yeah. Great. No response, Debbie, other than everybody clapped, and including people up here. So I think we totally agree. I'm not sure who was next. Maybe over there to the right. Sorry if you were waiting.
Oh, no, that's okay. Marilena Botazi, Baylor College of Medicine, Honduran by training in tropical medicine. So for me, ASTMH has been my home, I don't even know since when, right? And so I congratulate certainly this panel, because I think it really amplifies the voices that you represent, which is all of us here. But I want to maybe just have you maybe reflect a little bit more on expanding this concept of bringing more diversity even outside of the biomedical or tropical medicine. I mean, we have wonderful poet laureate, right? Communications, Julie, when you were a president, I enjoyed very much all the efforts of bringing the concepts of humility and compassion. Of course, Gina, which I don't see because she's over there, bringing more of this connectivity. So can you talk a little bit about bringing other disciplines? Like in a panel I was actually chairing, we brought in the legal perspective, the lawyers, bringing in engineering, bringing in, of course, the social sciences. Can you speak how we can help bringing all these other voices that we really need? Thank you.
Yeah, I can maybe take a first go at that. Super important, and I think this was Karen Goraleski who uses this term all the time, the big tent of ASTMH, and we have a lot of discussion about how big that tent should be and how many people and what discipline should be inside it. I think we have seen those who've been coming to the meeting for 20 or 30 years, which 20 or 30 years ago, it was just kind of a meeting of scientists talking about their particular pathogen, and that was it. And now it's growing to have all sorts of different things, and it needs to continue to grow. We had a discussion this morning with the past presidents about how obviously climate change is an overarching challenge for us, and overarching really depending upon, or no matter what pathogen or disease you're interested, there's an effect of climate change, and so we need to bring that in. But many other things, many of you know, I think human rights as a principle is very important to be represented in the society, and did my president's address on that last year. many things. There are challenges in that the tent is already pretty big, 13 concurrent sessions, right? I don't think anyone wants to go to 15 concurrent sessions. Raise your hand if you'd like 15 concurrent. So I don't think that's going to happen. And I think this is, for most of us, a great meeting, but after 4 days of it, you're like, wow, I'm wiped out. I can't take any more than that. So I don't think we're going to actually add a day on. So we do need to think about how to broaden the themes and broaden the that big tent and the cross-cutting themes there. It won't all be in person, I think. There's other ways, there's other modalities that we have to do it, and welcome your ideas in this. And one of the big challenges, I think, and opportunities for the society, and I've mentioned this in different forms, is, what do we add in addition to an annual meeting? Like, what can we do so that we can say throughout the year we're seeing the value of being an ASTMH member, that we're contributing, engaged with each other, with the external world, not just one time for 4 days, 4 very intense days across the year, but something that is more consistent. And so that is, that's a way that we need to expand that big tent. And then the other things that you mentioned in social sciences and climate change, it's not that they won't be represented here, but we need new avenues to have them represented as well. Julie?
Yeah, I think the many voices, I think it comes back to the theme, and I think this was asked earlier about, having your work fit into a solution. That throughput, and it's the theme of the meeting, from evidence to action, right? In order to do that, you need, the anthropologists, you need the policy people, you need people who think and speak very differently to be part of that. And I think actually, we talk about this we have some of this stuff with career paths and talking about that, but it would be really interesting to have some conversations here about what it takes to have the idea and what it takes to get it actually put at scale into programs, so that people can see that throughput and what does that mean. Because the earlier you think about the endpoint, the more likely it's going to be more streamlined to get there. And it comes from all of those different voices being part of it, because you can have something that, culturally you have some reason why something doesn't work, and there's lots of really fascinating examples of that hold you up. But if you would have brought in the right voices to begin with, you could have avoided that pitfall. So I think there's some ways that we could foster that at the society as well, too, to have that cross talk and share and honor what everybody's bringing to the table with their experience.
Thanks, Julie. I do see, unfortunately, we're moving on towards time, but why don't we, I'd like to give everyone a last moment or last thought that anyone would like to share. Jim, anything, last words you'd like to share with the society and attendees?
Well, to the students, I think we'd all appreciate your help in kind of implementing some of the things we talked about in terms of mentorship from my perspective, and to retry the experiment to get, it doesn't have to be any of us, it could be any more senior person here, to help the young people coming here to navigate the meeting and establishing these kind of relationships. It could be tailored to matching people's common interests.
Julie?
I guess I would say, we sitting up here are not ASTMH. We all are ASTMH. So, this is going to be a co-created future of how we can be most effective and be most effective in our work. And so, encourage that active engagement.
Only the single most important thing is to identify what it is that your enthusiasm, what you have enthusiasm for, and pursue it, and let it become a passion. And then you really will enjoy your career.
I remember when I came to my first meeting in 1996, it was amazing to me, because I thought, wow, I have found my people. This was just incredible. And the thing is, I still feel that way today. And now I meet people who are like me in 1996, and I just am so excited about the passion and enthusiasm that you bring to the society. So as Gina said, you're the future, you're moving it along, and there are many things we need to do better, but this is a wonderful group to be part of, and maybe the best point to make is people are friendly and approachable here. I was shocked in 1996 to see all these people whose names I'd seen on papers who would answer me when I asked them a question. So don't feel shy about doing that. There are amazing people here, just go up and talk to them.
To combine the thinking about future, but also where we grow and don't grow in 13 is enough. I've been impressed that sometimes it's getting people together within the knowledge sets within the society. An example is I held a meeting of people who work on vector resistance and drug resistance, and it turned out they had never met with each other. And the principles of biology and resistance and the drivers and how to evaluate and the tools you need were very similar. And how neglected the area was also very similar. So I think there's ways of thinking, not only in bringing other experts from the outside to join in on discussions that we care about without necessarily bringing in that entire field, but also looking for critical discussions within the society where we do have the people, but they've never had that opportunity to think across rather than up and down.
Yeah, thanks. I have nothing to add to all the great comments that were just made, so I won't add anything other than to thank all the panelists and thank you for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of the meeting.